Psalm 68 begins saying very openly and grandly, "Let God arise. Let God arise." It is a plea in deep prayer for the providence of Jehovah, a deep prayer for strength and aid, for comfort and hope, a deep plea for divine assurance. For man is in a terrible state, and the state that David alludes to in an open fashion later in this 68th Psalm is that of sinfulness. Let God arise and let his enemies be scattered. Let God arise and let sin be forgiven. Let sin be remitted. Let something be done to cover the sins of man. The enemies of God are those who stand with Satan and his sinful manners and practices. And therefore the prayer will lead to the salvation of man. We drop from the first verse of the 68th Psalm to the 17th, in which the strength of the Lord is reckoned as that of a host, a vast army, powerful and able to be victorious under any circumstance. The chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them, as in Sinai in the holy place. Thou hast ascended on high, thou hast led captivity captive, thou hast received gifts for men, yea, for the rebellious also, that the Lord God might dwell among them. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. In a few lines, the psalmist has given us the scheme of redemption. It is in answer to the prayer, "Let God arise." And he gives us the picture of man in sin, dead unto God, separated from the Almighty, and reckoned as an enemy of Jehovah because of his sinfulness. The chariots of God are 20,000, an army of military might, given in the figures of a carnal war, endeavoring to show that man is not possibly strong enough to withstand the forces of God. That it is necessary that we recognize Jehovah as God, become aware of his authority and his power, and bend ourselves submissively unto him, lest he overrun. And the prayer of the righteous is that God will arise with power and with might, with the strength that is only his by reason of deity, and overwhelm sin, conquer Satan, destroy the forces of evil, and allow us to live in a peaceable and restful manner, enjoying life as man ought. For David is able to complain and to show with regard that man has been miserably dealt a hand of evil by the evil one. And he's pleading to God for help. We reckon that God is not able to be defeated. We reckon that God is final in authority. We reckon that God is all wise in his words. We reckon that his word has been revealed unto us in a manner that is understandable by man. We reckon that we are inferior to God and therefore answerable and accountable unto him. We reckon that one day we shall stand in judgment before him, and therefore we reckon as well that preparation is necessary for that august day and occasion. Man today ignores God's authority, ignores God's wisdom, ignores God as sovereign. Man lives as though he will never meet God. Man lives as though he will never answer to God. Man lives as though he is his own God. Man lives as though there is no consequence of his crimes against God. He's doing his very best to ignore everything of God. Throughout the Proverbs, the words of wisdom tell us that professionally we must be honorable, personally we must be upright, morally we must be correct, religiously we must be submissive to God, for we are souls made in his image and created by him and destined to meet him, to give an answer of our stewardship of the preciousness of the life that he's given us. And the Proverbs are written to men in the world, not men in God. They are proverbs to bring man to understand God and to enjoy the relationship that they can have with God. And yet they're totally ignored. And when the commandments were given in an early day to the people of God, the nation of Israel, several things were remembered that they are to emphasize in their lives concerning the existence of God, and the fact that there is none other equal unto God, and that none should be remembered or worshipped or praised as God, and no image or representation of God should be made, for he cannot be imaged in the mind of man and by the hands of men. And that we are to remember him, that we are to honor our father and our mother. And the New Testament writer will say that these are the first commandments given of God with promise. First, know God. Second, honor thy father and thy mother. They're related. But we see in today's society that with the abandonment of God, the abandonment of father and mother, the abandonment of professional ethics, the abandonment of moral standards, the abandonment of everything that can bring peace and joy. Let God arise. Let God arise. For without him and without his word, we are a hopeless and a helpless people. But we said that this passage of the Psalm, the 68th chapter and beginning in verse 18, gives to us the very scheme of God whereby righteousness is known, redemption is realized, and everlasting life becomes a fact that is in the heart and the soul of man. Notice it in verse 18. Thou hast ascended on high, thou hast led captivity captive, thou hast received gifts for men. 3 lines, 3 principles, all vital to the gospel scheme of redemption. Thou hast ascended on high is a phrase apparent in its interpretation. It deals with the fact that God was manifest in the flesh in the coming of Jesus into this world, and then he ascended after his resurrection from the dead into the heavens from whence he came. When Jesus came into this world, it was with a great degree of mystery. Mystery in the sense not only of a grand scheme of things, but mystery also in the accommodative sense, namely that we didn't understand it, we didn't comprehend it, and we cannot likewise perform a birth similar to his. For he was in the beginning with God. He is the second member of the Godhead, deity. He was the creator in the book of Genesis. He is the angel of the Lord in the law and the prophets of the Old Testament that exercises providence to the people of God. But when he came into this world to manifest deity in the flesh, he came by the virgin birth. But when he ascended, it was in that body raised from the dead and witnessed by the apostles. For there they were on the hill of Calvary, or the hill of, not Calvary, but there they were on the Mount of Ascension, and they saw Jesus bodily ascending into the heavens above and the clouds above. Thou hast ascended on high. The biblical doctrine of the ascension is this in a kernel. God accepted the sacrifice of Jesus Christ to the remission of the sins of man. Therefore thou hast received gifts for men. He didn't receive gifts of men. He received gifts for men. Jesus is therefore dying on the cross, on Calvary's skull, in the crucifixion for men. And it is a gift. When we speak of the gift of God and the love of God in the familiar passage of John 3:16, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him might not perish but have everlasting life, we speak of love and we speak of a gift in its highest sense, to its greatest degree. And now, David anticipated it. And when Jesus dies, it is not merely the gift to man, but a gift for man. And it is a gift then to God for man in the sanctifying of man from sin. Thou hast ascended on high. Thou hast received gifts for men. Couched in between these two terms, thou hast led captivity captive. To lead captivity captive is to free the prisoners. The captive is the prisoner. To lead the captivity, or those imprisoned captive, is to free them from their imprisonment, to deliver them from their bondage. Therefore, an allusion to the bondage of the Hebrew children in Egypt in an earlier day, and a reference in anticipation of the day of Christ to the imprisonment of man spiritually by sin to Satan. Now, having been freed by the blood of the Lamb, that Jesus in his death enters into the domain of Satan, into the Hadean world, and develops the very power of deity in the realm of the dead to the degree that Satan is overwhelmed, overthrown, and dismissed. And the power of death is ruined by the power of Jesus in life. he has raised from the dead, taking the authority away from Satan over death, and has therefore risen with such a gift of life unto God for men, that God can now look upon the man who comes to Jesus and say, I forgive. I forgive. Thou hast ascended on high. Thou hast led captivity captive. Thou hast received gifts for men. Every one of the statements, 3 in number, in the past tense. Prophetically stated, but put in the past tense. And that is assurance. That is fact of the matter language. That establishes the authority of the power of God. That what God proposes, God carries out. What God promises, God grants. What God says is fact. Therefore, there shall be no doubt about God. There shall be no doubt about glory. There shall be no doubt that Jesus is the Christ in the flesh. There shall be no doubt that he was crucified and buried in the sepulchre. There shall be no doubt that he arose from the dead, taking Satan's power over sin and death away from him. And there shall be no doubt that he has ascended into heaven, no doubt that this is the very gift unto God to the saving of man from sin, to the redemption of man from his imprisonment unto Satan in sin. Yea, these gifts are for the rebellious also. Paul puts it this way in the Roman letter. While we were yet enemies, while we were yet sinners, Christ died in our stead. We were enemies to God, enemies to Christ. It was our very sinfulness that drove the mobs to crucify the Lord. But he died for the rebellious also. Greater grace, purer mercy, deeper love cannot be imagined by man. And even in light of our knowledge of God and Christ and the Spirit, our hope of heaven and our recognition of the purity of the gospel and the wisdom of the parables and the truthfulness of the word written unto our salvation, no matter how aware we may be of these things, no matter how deep our faith in them might run, the fact still remains that we cannot, by the very concept of the mind and the power of intellect, come up with an illustration of greater love and mercy and grace than is seen in this act of Jesus and God in the Spirit at the cross, dying for the rebellious, that God might dwell among them. Dying for the rebellious, that God might dwell among them. The only way rebellion is quashed is by the inflowing of God. An awareness of God, a reverence for God, dutiful respect and obedience to God, and rebellion dies. You see now why that earlier in the prophets, back in the days of Samuel and King Saul, that rebellion is as witchcraft. Rebellion, stubbornness as witchcraft, idolatry. It's because that it is a repudiation of God. Rebellion against any authority that is legitimate is not merely rebellion against that one or that authority. It's against God. Rebellion against the father's authority. Rebellion against the mother's authority. Rebellion against the elder's authority. Rebellion against the governor's authority. Rebellion against the teacher's authority. Authority that is legitimate in its realm. Rebellion against it, in the final analysis, is rebellion against God. And that is why the first commandment of the promise is, honor thy father and thy mother. What was the promise? That thou mightest see good days and a long life. That thou mightest see good days and a long life. And therefore, without the rebellion, with the honor, there is peace, and there is joy, and there is hope. Psalm 68 and 19. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits, even the God of our salvation. Where is God? Does he care? Why doesn't he act? When will he do something about it? I ask those questions daily. But the book speaks otherwise. Man is negative, God is positive. Man says, where is he? Why doesn't he? And the book says, I am there and I already have. Notice how it is worded. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits, blessings. Daily loadeth. It's ongoing, continual, daily. He loadeth a bounty, liberal, generous, meaningful, with benefits, blessings, providence, provision, peace, hope. Man says, where is he? Why hasn't he? And God says, I am there. I am aware. And I have loaded you with blessings. He that is our God is the God of salvation. And unto God the Lord belong the issues from death. He that is our God, in contrast to the idolater's false God, dead so-called God, the images, the icons, in contrast to our God, is the God of salvation. Their God is the God of condemnation. Our God is the God of salvation. Their God is a dead God. Our God is a living God. Their God is a dumb God. Our God is a speaking God. Their God is an ignorant God. Our God is a wise God. Our God is holy. Theirs is not sanctified. Our God is the God of salvation, and unto God the Lord belong the issues from death. The issues from death, that has to be the resurrection, doesn't it? The issue from death. What comes from death? The resurrection. And Jesus in John 5 edifies us, outlines further the doctrine of the resurrection. The good and the evil alike raised from the dead. For the soul is immortal, does not die. It meets God in judgment, the issues of death. And God shall wound the head of his enemies, the hairy scalp of such an one as goeth on still in his trespasses. The judgment will come. The gifts given unto God to the redemption of man are grand. Jesus, the Son of God, gave his life and sacrificed his blood to our redemption. God accepted that as the gift of redemption, if men will come to him. Our God is the God of salvation, not condemnation. But our God is also the God of judgment, and therefore he shall wound the head of his enemies. That if man in his rebellion will not come to God for that salvation, the judgment of God brings punishment to the disobedient. Those who continue on still in his trespasses, ignoring God, failing God, and destroying self. Lord, may God arise for the sake of man, socially, morally, spiritually, that we might one day walk with him forevermore in perfect peace. Have you begun that walk with Christ? Your trespasses forgiven, walking in righteousness, filled with hope of life eternal? The Lord has loaded us with the blessings in Christ of the redemption of our soul. May you take advantage of it even this day and be blessed by it eternally. Will you come while we stand, while we sing, please?